Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back at you again with some more lore. And happy Valentine's Day, yes, happy Valentine's Day to all the lovely couples out there and to all the singles. Yeah, they'll be over soon, my guy. Hey, at least after this there'll be cheap chocolate. So, in honor of Valentine's Day, I thought, why don't I do something, lovey-dovey. Maybe top 5 best couples in all of Warhammer 40k. But then I was like, you know what? Nah. Let's talk about some warp ghosts instead of long-dead space marines. Because fellas, if your missus can't really enjoy the warp ghosts of a long-dead space marine, is she really worth it? I mean, probably that means she's not really into 40k, and people who are into 40k often have mental illness. We're not exactly right upstairs. So, maybe positive, maybe negative, who knows? Do I know? God almighty not. But I do know about the Legion of the Damned, everyone's favorite, spectral space marines. But my waffling aside and my nonsense ramblings over there gone, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about what exactly does the future hold for everyone's favorite space marine ghosts. So, what exactly are the Legion of the Damned? Well, here's what we do know. The Legion of the Damned are spectral warp-based space marines. They appear out of nowhere, and they appear when the Imperium is at its most dire. Some people have likened them unto the Emperor's angels, or his Imperial demons, I suppose you could say. Fact of the matter is, they are a warp manifestation that appears itself as a space marine. They are not affiliated to Chaos, they hate Chaos, they are very loyalist, and they come from the Emperor. That is what we do know. And everything else, up and out the window. But a very popular theory, and a theory that I subscribe to, is that these are every single space marine that has been lost, betrayed, or been killed by Chaos, with the original core being made up from the legions of Istavan, and a headless Primarch at the helm, aka Verus Manus. Now a lot of people don't like this. Is that actually the case? I don't know. Maybe not, but me personally, I want that to be the case because I think that's just badass. It's kind of like the whole idea of the Blood Angels falling to the Black Rage and screaming Horus, but then, fire instead of blood. And, being a salamander guy, I appreciate that myself. But the fact of the matter is, they are known throughout the entirety of the Imperium. They appear when they are needed, they are wholly and utterly invulnerable for almost the most devastating of attacks. And even when an attack does land home, they do not destroyed, but they get dispelled back into the warp. They're also pretty much exclusively ranged, as their bolt shells are coated in warp fire, and are basically a better version of the Thousand Suns bolters, and they don't really have any melee attacks, or at least we haven't seen any, or very limited. And their final, last big showing, the most poignant part that they played was during the fall of Kadian, in the 13th Black Crusade, where they stood with the rest of the Imperium on Kadian, and it was here that we finally got confirmed that they are indeed warp-based entities. Because when the pylons went off, the Legion of the Damned got dispelled, as well as with Saint Celestine. And as we know, Saint Celestine is a warp entity, so too are the Legion of the Damned. So, we know for a fact that they're from the warp, and that was the last big confirmation. But ever since the fall of Kadian, we don't really know anything else about the Legion of the Damned. Now, there may be the odd mention here and there, but there's not really been any really big focus on these spectral boys. Now, it could be that GW is not going to do anything with them, and they'll just hang around as, they exist. Which, for most factions in 40k, is a pretty shit deal, but for the Legion of the Damned, I think that it's actually pretty fitting. They're a legion of ghosts. So, having them not exactly be front and center makes sense. But I would like them to appear a bit more occasionally, personally. And considering that they've never really gotten a very strong focused deep dive, I think one wouldn't hurt. But only one, let's not give them too much here. But then that begs the question, what exactly is going to happen to the Legion of the Damned? We know for a fact that with the return of the Primarchs, the Emperor has stirred, quite literally in Bobby G's case. Considering he burned Nurgle's gardens, revived Bobby G, smacked Nurgle across the mouth, and told Mortarion that he isn't mad at him. That means that the Emperor is out and about for the first time in God almighty knows how long. Well, about 10,000 years actually, we do know that. The fact of the matter is, the setting is moving forward, it's progressing, and a lot of people dislike that. But that means that a lot of the untapped plotlines that have been lost for forever may, maybe, be moved. And the Legion of the Damned is one such thing. So that begs the question, what is the future for the Legion of the Damned? Well, basically, there are a few ways we can take this. The first way is quite simply, nothing changes. They continue to be exactly as they are. No changes, no deep dives, nothing ever happens. They're a legion of warp ghosts that appear whenever they need to appear. And as I said before, it's not exactly the worst fate for them. If they stand as they are and as they remain, that's pretty much alright, because that's the faction they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be mysterious, they're quite literally ghosts. They appear when they need to, and that's that. The only downside to this is that no more focus is in media. I would like them to basically show up pretty much every now and again, man. Like, even if it's just a little, like, one-side thing, oh, the Legion of the Damned appeared here. I don't know, I'd like them just to be active a little bit more because they're fucking cool. But some would argue the fact that they're not so active lends to their coolness. I don't exactly know how this is exactly. Maybe if we got more of it, then we'd be able to see, but me personally, if I like it, I want more of it. Simple as. The second option we have is that they do stay as they are, but they get a little bit more of a spotlight. For example, a book. You get one nice book, it could simply be called Damned or The Legion. And I would really like if this was a case of one of the Primarchs, maybe the Lion or Gilliman, actually ending up talking to them. It would be very, very interesting to see where they would take the Legion of the Damned. If, for example, they took it at the Istvan route, in that case the Legion of the Damned are actually the remnants of said Legion as well as all Space Marines that have been killed, it'd be very, very sobering for either the Lion or Gilliman to talk to a Marine that maybe they knew during the Heresy, and to see him now as he is as an Imperial demon. And from there we could learn a little bit more. Basically, what it would do is that it would solidify the origin story of them, and that's that. Also, we could see them front and center. We could see an actual legion of ghosts appearing and destroying the enemies of chaos, which is just very epic in my mind. But the problem with that is that a lot of people say we shouldn't know their origin. Less is more. The less we know, the better. Some people love that the Legion of the Damned just have nothing to them, and that's part of their story. And whilst I can agree, I think that they don't have enough. You need something to hold on to. And right now the Legion of the Damned don't really have much of anything. As I said, their last major implication in the story happened during the 13th Black Crusade, which was quite literally about, 6 years ago at this point? 5-6 years, give or take? No, more than that actually, 2017? So that's about 8 years ago. That's a lot. That's a lot. And even then, they didn't really get that much stuff thrown at them anyway. And even their involvement in the Black Crusade, it wasn't like some super awesome, amazing part, it was like a mention here and there. So personally, I like the idea of a Legion of the Damned getting a new book, and for them just getting a little bit of hindsight into the modern Legion of the Damned in the modern 40k. And then from there, they can just come and go as they please, mention here, mention there, and a little bit, just spice it up. Just give us something to sink our teeth into. Because a bread sandwich isn't bad, but if there's only one slice of bread, then it's not a sandwich. But that's the second option. We then have the third option. And the third option is kinda wacky. The third option is, what if they change the Legion of the Damned? Change them how? Quite literally, any way. As I mentioned before, the Emperor is coming back. So then that begs the question, how much of the Imperium is going to get to interact with the Warp? Because remember, back in old 40k, the Warp was something that was exclusively the realm of chaos. All the ideas of Imperial demons and Imperial saints, those were just, up in the air. But now, in modern 40k, we see that the Imperium is actively acting in the Warp, meaning that opens a whole load of possibilities. What if we see the Emperor in the Warp again, but this time, he's the one commanding the Legion of the Damned? It doesn't have to be much, maybe just like a paragraph or two. Let's say the hordes of Khorne are going to kill the world and they're traveling through the Warp Portal, but all of a sudden, in front of the Warp Portal appears a headless Primarch, wielding a massive hammer at the head of a legion of Space Marines. The Legion of the Damned, now that the Emperor is back, or that he's kinda back, or a shot of the Emperor, whatever it is, they're actually acting in the Warp. Of course, that does also coincide in the fact that the Emperor is becoming a pseudo-chaos god, or an order god, or whatever you want to call it. He has his own domain in the Warp, or he's going to make one, and then that will then open him up to fight a war on two fronts. Because right now, Chaos is relatively safe. With the exception of a few odd things here and there, Chaos is pretty much safe in the Warp. The Imperium doesn't really attack the Warp. But what if they did? What if the Emperor ordered the Legion of the Damned, his demons, to start fighting on the demonic front? It could be a case of where Chaos had long held the Warp as their safety and had grown fat off it. Biggie can simply come in, smack him across the head, and send the fire boys to do the fire stuff, and Nurgle is going to be sad yet again. Now, this idea hinges on the fact that the Emperor is indeed going to be doing something in the Warp. And again, as we know, the Emperor is back and he's in the Warp again. He's been in the Warp, but the question is he only going to go in the Warp if he needs to, or is he going to be proactive about it? And honestly, that depends on where they want to take the Emperor's story and what they want to do with the Emperor. As I've mentioned before, the Emperor from 30k, aka the Master of Mankind, and the God Emperor of the Imperium are two very different characters. Now, what exactly the God Emperor of 40k is and what he wants to do, we have no idea yet. We do know, however, he's kinda cooked from his interaction with Gilliman. But would he decide to create his own domain in the Warp? Would he decide to unleash the Legion of Hell? Who knows? But in the same vein, let's say the Emperor is not involved. Let's say Big E continues to be on his throne. What about the Legion of the Damned finally start to show some agency? We know that the Lion has returned. We know that Guilliman has returned. So what if the Lion and Guilliman decide, for whatever reason, to harness his power? Let's say maybe the Lion, right? He decides, I need to figure out who these guys are. They're hella useful, but where are they? Who are they? How can I marshal them? And who knows, maybe there's some fallen amongst the ranks. So maybe that's how we do this. Arisen talks about them. And he talks about how one of his brothers fell and then erupted in flames and became a demon. But not a demon as possessed by chaos, a demon possessed by the Emperor. And that will then lead the Lion to follow on this path about discovering the Legion of the Damned. And then that could lead him to getting them as an ally. Or more specifically, having communication with them. As we talked about in our previous video about what people get wrong about the Dark Angels, the Forest is a unique type of realm. It is a realm of order, the opposite of chaos. It's a blank realm or a pseudo-blank realm. Also, I'm really peeved about that video about how many people called me an idiot for saying, oh, the Dark Angels can't be blanks. They're not blanks. They're pseudo-blanks. What do I mean by that? I mean, can you explain to me how a Dark Angel can get hit by a psychic witchfire and be perfectly fine? If you can have a term for that, please let me know and I'll call on that. But to me, that's a pseudo-blank or a pseudo-immunity to the warp. Sorry, a little annoyed, got a lot of questions and comments about people saying I'm done. I'm sorry, if the term doesn't exist, what am I supposed to say? But that's neither here nor there. Easy there, Brad. So let's say the Lion and his blank genes, or anti-warp, whatever you want to call it, let's say his resistance to the warp is able to allow him to communicate and talk to the Legion of the Damned. Let's say he's able to do something that other people are not able to. He's then going to be able to communicate with them. He's then able to finally understand a little bit about them and maybe gain some hindsight. Again, through this way we could learn about them and the Legion of the Damned could be a bit more of a standing force rather than just appearing when they need to. And it would allow them to gain a new foothold in Warhammer 40k in the current canon, and we get a good insight into these boys. But with all these questions that I put through and all these possibilities, there is one thing that I haven't talked about, and it's the question of, what should the Legion of the Damned be? Of course, there are some who argue they're exactly what they should be right now and they shouldn't be touched. Which, you know, fair enough, I get that, but in the same vein, you could say a lot about that stuff in 40k. A lot of people love about 40k is the fact that it's stagnant, that nothing changes. And whilst that is indeed something to love, it can be overdone. And a lot of the old guard don't really seem to accept that. There are so many elements of 40k that can't exist as stagnant. Why? Because they weren't good to begin with. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty that do exist and shouldn't have been changed. The Primaris example is a big issue of that, and the way that it was done is quite stupid in my opinion. I don't like the idea of getting rid of Firstborn, and a lot of people tend to agree with me. So, the question at the end of the day is this. What exactly should the Legion of the Damned be? What should they be changed? Should they be changed at all? And ultimately, I think that it's a case of they shouldn't be changed, but we should get more of it. I think that, you know, expanding on the story just a little bit will help fill out a lot of the gaps that we have. And in the end, it'll make them more of a well-rounded faction. Because right now, they aren't really a faction, they're more of a thing that people throw in here and there, to be frank. And I think that getting a little bit more will just build them up to a point that they're a bit more respected as such. But ultimately, whether or not GW wants to change them, whether or not they want to do something crazy with them, or whether or not they just want to keep them as is, that doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, they're something that's just cool. They're a cool idea, they're wacky and crazy, and at the end of the day, giant, fiery, spectral space marines shooting bolt shells from literal hell, that's something that we can all get behind. In Warhammer 40k, we have a tendency to argue about everything, and put everything super straightforward, super direct, super important, and sometimes we get lost in the sauce, and the whole point of the conversation gets thrown away. So, ultimately, when talking about what the Legion of the Damned should be, what they are meant to be, and how this is to do, I say that we should look for it for what it's supposed to be, for what it is. And it's something cool. Let's not get lost in the sauce too much of discussing what could be or what can't be, because 40k fans, we tend to get a little aggressive in how much we love or hate something. And I think a bit balance will keep everybody in check. But at the end of the day, the Legion of the Damned are here to stay. And whether or not they get everything in between, or whether or not they get nothing at all, they're still going to be the epic badass Legion that they were always meant to be. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know down below, what do you guys think? What do you want for the Legion of the Damned? Do you think it should stay as is? And what do you guys think about the whole thing about 40k fans taking shit way too seriously? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say down below. But we'll say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Major of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, and Mr. Corn's Butcher. Shout out to my corporal tier members, Mr. Bowen and Mr. Tremail the Math Kitty. And then finally, but certainly not least, shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Waslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Michael Hayeda, and Mr. Hattori's Cuz. And very big shout out to my Patreon members, Mr. Fortress Unum, General Alexander, and Mr. Bowen. Thank you guys also very much. It means the world to me that you guys do this, and I will always be grateful for it. So if you want to join these awesome gals and guys, make sure to sign up today. You get early access to its videos, a bunch of awesome stuff behind the scenes stuff, giving a hand in making these videos, votes, polls, all that stuff. And if you sign with the captain tier, you get to pick a topic about literally anything, and I will make the video the very next day. But remember, whether or not you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Yes, I will. But ladies and gentlemen, I have been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all also very much for watching. Make sure to stay strong out there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss Rangers. Should I have done this during October for Halloween? Yes. Will I do a Valentine's Day episode on Halloween? Maybe. Why? Because I can.